Welcome back to the second episode in our series on death row in America. We're continuing our look into the lives and crimes of those scheduled for execution in 2025. Oscar Franklin Smith, Tennessee. Offences: murder of Judith Smith and her two sons Chad and Jason Burnett. Scheduled execution date: May 22nd, 2025. Oscar Franklin Smith's case dates back to October 1st, 1989, when one of the most shocking triple homicides in Nashville's history unfolded. That evening, 35-year-old Judith Smith, along with her two teenage sons, 16-year-old Chad and 13-year-old Jason Burnett, were found murdered in their home. Judith had been both shot and stabbed. Chad was stabbed, and Jason was shot in the neck. Suspicion quickly turned to Oscar Smith, Judith's estranged husband. The two had gone through a difficult separation, with divorce proceedings and custody disputes creating deep tension. Investigators believed Smith had both the motive and the opportunity to commit the killings. At trial, prosecutors relied heavily on what they claimed was a bloody palm print matching Smith, found on the bedsheets at the crime scene. Although the murder weapon was never recovered and there were no eyewitnesses, the palm print was considered a key piece of evidence. In 1990, Smith was found guilty of all three murders and sentenced to death. Over the years, Smith has consistently maintained his innocence. In recent times, new developments have brought renewed attention to his case. Advanced DNA testing on the bloody palm print, once central to his conviction, reportedly excluded Smith as the source. His attorneys have argued that this new evidence raises serious doubts about his guilt and have pushed for a new trial or clemency. However, Tennessee courts have so far denied all attempts to overturn the conviction. Oscar Smith was originally scheduled to be executed in April 2022, but the execution was called off just hours before it was to be carried out due to problems with the state's lethal injection process. After a lengthy review of Tennessee's execution protocols, the state has now rescheduled Smith's execution for May 22nd, 2025. If carried out, Smith's execution would be the first in Tennessee since the protocol overhaul, and it remains one of the most controversial cases in the state, due not only to the brutality of the crime but also the lingering questions surrounding the evidence used to convict him. Now in his 70s, Smith continues to fight his sentence, claiming that the state may be executing an innocent man. Mathew Lee Johnson, Texas. Offense: capital murder of Nancy Harris during a robbery. Scheduled execution date: May 20th, 2025. On the morning of May 20th, 2012, 76-year-old Nancy Harris was opening the Fina Whip-In convenience store in Garland, Texas. It was a routine she had done for years. But that day, things took a horrifying turn. Johnson walked into the store carrying a bottle of lighter fluid and a cigarette lighter. Surveillance footage showed him dousing Nancy in the flammable liquid during a robbery, before setting her on fire and casually walking out. She was still alive and managed to give police a description of her attacker, but the burns covered nearly half her body. Nancy Harris died 5 days later in the hospital. Johnson, who was high on crack cocaine and alcohol at the time, was arrested soon after. He admitted to the murder and was charged with capital murder. At trial, the jury heard the details: how he stole just a few items, including cigarettes and cash, and in return took an innocent woman's life in one of the cruelest ways imaginable. In 2013, Johnson was found guilty and sentenced to death. He begged for mercy during sentencing, claiming he didn't want his family to suffer the way Nancy's had. But the jury wasn't moved. The emotional testimony from Harris's family sealed the verdict. There would be no leniency. Since then, Johnson has spent over a decade on death row. He's appealed the sentence multiple times, but every attempt has failed. His final appeal was rejected in early 2025. With that, a Dallas County judge signed his death warrant, setting his execution for May 20th, 2025. Now, just days away from his scheduled execution, Johnson's name has resurfaced in public debate. Some activists argue that addiction and mental health played a role in the crime. Others say that justice, long delayed, is finally being served. Jeffrey Glenn Hutchinson, Florida. Offences: murder of Renee Flaherty and her 3 children, Jeffrey, Amanda and Logan. Scheduled execution date: May 1st, 2025. It was the night of September 11th, 1998, in Crestview, Florida, when a horrific act of Hutchinson, a Gulf War veteran and father figure to 3 children, returned home after a heated argument with his live-in girlfriend, 29-year-old Renee Flaherty. He had briefly left the house to drink at a local bar, but when he came back, the anger and instability brewing inside him exploded into deadly violence. Armed with a 12-gauge Mossberg shotgun, Hutchinson walked into the family home and opened fire. Renee Flaherty was shot first, followed by her children, Jeffrey, Amanda and Logan, each gunned down in their sleep. They were just 9, 7 and 4 years old. Hutchinson then picked up the phone, called 911 and calmly told the operator, "I just shot my family." When police arrived, they found him in the garage still on the phone. The murder weapon was on the kitchen counter. The scene inside was something out of a nightmare. At trial, Hutchinson's defense pointed to his Gulf War service, claiming he suffered from post-traumatic stress, bipolar disorder, and Gulf War illness. He was also heavily intoxicated that night, but none of it could outweigh the gravity of what he had done. He was found guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder. The court handed down 3 death sentences for each of the children and a life sentence for Renee Flaherty's murder. Now, nearly 3 decades later, Jeffrey Hutchinson's time on death row is coming to an end. Florida has scheduled his execution for May 1st, 2025. If carried out, his execution will mark the state's continued use of capital punishment in cases of extreme domestic violence. Today, Hutchinson sits in his late 50s, awaiting his fate at Florida State Prison. This is a reminder of how even those who once served their country can fall into a darkness from which there is no return. James Osgood, Alabama. Offences: murder of his wife, Deborah Osgood. Scheduled execution date: April 24th, 2025. James Osgood's case is one that speaks not only to violence, but to resignation and the haunting consequences of guilt. Osgood brutally murdered his wife, Deborah Osgood. He beat and stabbed her multiple times during what was described as a domestic dispute that spiraled into deadly rage. But unlike many other capital cases, the aftermath took a drastically different turn. Osgood didn't run or deny it. He called 911 himself, calmly telling the dispatcher what he had done and that he was ready to surrender. That chilling level of clarity followed him all the way into custody and court. He pled guilty to capital murder, and a jury recommended the death penalty. The judge agreed. But while most death row inmates spend decades appealing their sentences, James Osgood chose a different path. He asked for his execution to be carried out. In a letter to his attorney, Osgood wrote, "I no longer feel as if I'm even existing. I'm tired. I want to complete my sentence." It was a quiet, somber statement that carried the weight of someone who had made peace with dying. After psychiatric evaluations, it's confirmed that Osgood was competent to make such a decision. Alabama granted his wish. Now, more than a decade on death row, James Osgood is scheduled to be executed by lethal injection on April 24th, 2025. Now in his 60s, Osgood has become one of the rare inmates to voluntarily accept his fate. His name added to the short but sobering list of so-called volunteers for execution in the United States. Moises Sandoval Mendoza, Texas. Offense: capital murder of Rachel Tollison. Scheduled execution. Date: April 23rd, 2025. Moises Sandoval was convicted of the 2004 capital murder of 20-year-old Rachel Tollison in Farmersville, Texas. At the time of the crime, Mendoza was 21 years old and had previously been in a relationship with Tollison. On March 8, 2004, Tollison was reported missing after failing to attend a family gathering. Her burned and partially buried body was later discovered in a remote area near Mendoza's home. According to court records, Mendoza abducted Tollison from her residence, sexually assaulted her, strangled her, and then attempted to destroy evidence by burning her remains. Mendoza was arrested shortly after the discovery. He provided a recorded confession to law enforcement, detailing the abduction and murder. In 2005, he was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. Since his conviction, Mendoza has filed multiple appeals, including claims of ineffective assistance of counsel and challenges to the admissibility of his confession. However, state and federal courts have upheld both his conviction and sentence. In late 2024, a judge signed his execution warrant, scheduling the lethal injection for April 23, 2025. Timothy Coleman, Ohio. Offense: aggravated murder of Melinda Stevens. Scheduled execution date: October 30th, 2020. On January 2nd, 1996, Timothy Coleman fatally shot 33-year-old Melinda Stevens in an alley behind Riddle's Ribs in Springfield, Ohio. Stevens had served as a confidential informant for the Springfield Police Department, participating in controlled drug purchases from Coleman, which led to his indictment on drug trafficking charges. While awaiting trial for these charges, Coleman expressed intentions to eliminate Stevens to prevent her from testifying. He discussed plans with fellow inmates and acquaintances, indicating his desire to take care of her to avoid a potential 15 to 45-year prison sentence. On the evening of the murder, witnesses observed Coleman and Stevens together at Riddle's Ribs. Shortly thereafter, Stevens was found with 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Coleman later made statements to associates, implying his involvement in the killing. In 1997, Coleman was convicted of aggravated murder with a capital specification for killing a witness to prevent testimony. The jury recommended a death sentence, which the court upheld. Subsequent appeals, including claims of ineffective assistance of counsel and challenges to the evidence, were denied by state and federal courts. As of now, Timothy Coleman's execution is scheduled for October 30th, 2025. Kareem M Jackson, Ohio. Offense: aggravated murder of Antonio Hunter and Terrence Walker. Scheduled execution date: December 10th, 2025. On March 25th, 1997, Kareem M Jackson participated in a robbery that resulted in the execution-style murders of Antonio Hunter and Terrence Walker in Columbus, Ohio. Jackson and his accomplices entered the victim's apartment under the pretense of purchasing marijuana. During the robbery, Hunter and Walker were forced to lie face down on the floor and were each shot in the head through a pillow. The assailants stole approximately $45, a small amount of marijuana, and a cellular phone before fleeing the scene. Jackson was arrested on March 28, 1997, and charged with multiple counts, including aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, and felonious assault. In 1999, he was convicted and sentenced to death. Over the years, Jackson has filed several appeals, including claims of prosecutorial misconduct and ineffective assistance of counsel. In 2021, the Sixth Circuit Court granted him permission to file a successive habeas corpus petition. Due to ongoing issues with Ohio's lethal injection protocol and the availability of execution drugs, Jackson's execution has been rescheduled multiple times. As of now, his execution is scheduled for December 10th, 2025. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode covering more cases on death row. Thanks for watching.